Well, welcome back to my kitchen. Here it is once again, just shortly before 5 o'clock on a Friday evening, and it is definitely wine o'clock at my house. So I'm going to pour a glass for myself and tell you what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be spatchcocking the chicken. We've already cut that apart in one of our other demos. If you had questions on that, you could certainly post a question on it, but here is our spatchcocked chicken ready to go. It's on my board. His little legs have been put through his skin to hold them tight. And I initially was going to do it on the grill tonight, but it was windy outside and some clouds rolled in, and I don't trust that it's not going to rain on me as we're starting to grill this thing. So I've decided to shift gears and put it in the oven for you. So I'm going to just walk you through a little bit about how I'm going to season this chicken, and then I'll also walk you through some of the things we're going to have along with this tonight. It's a beautiful evening. It happens to be Good Friday, and we had hoped maybe we would eat out, but again, those clouds rolled in, not going to happen. So I'm also going to make a coleslaw, and we're just going to throw some naan, some Indian flatbread, on the stovetop griddle and get that nice and toasty. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with those two. But first, let's talk about our chicken. Again, chicken safety. Biggest thing is that your board is clean, your hands are clean to start with. First thing I'm going to do, this chicken has been sitting on my counter for, I'd say an hour and a half, coming up to room temperature. And I did dry it pretty well about an hour ago, but I'm going to do it again because the drier that skin is, the crispier it will get in the oven. And I'm not going to add anything to this chicken to help it crisp up at all. There's enough fat under that skin to make it good and crispy. I don't need to add extra oil or butter or anything. You will see some recipes where the chefs will pick up the skin and maybe rub some butter underneath that. But that's just extra calories and it doesn't help in browning at all. The first thing I'm going to do, I've got my salt ready, I've got my pepper ready, a little bit of moisture on the bottom of the board there, and I've got my rub ready. I'm going to salt and pepper the bottom, the underside of the chicken, and I'm going to be very generous with my salt. Now this is why I work on a bigger board. I keep the smaller board that the chicken is on here, and then on my regular cutting board, I just let that catch all of the overflow from my salt and my pepper. That way I don't have such a big mess to clean up in the kitchen. Now that was a fair amount of salt. I'd say that was a good teaspoon of salt that went on the underside of this chicken. That'll make such a difference in how your chicken is flavored. And just give it a good spritz of fresh ground pepper. And then I have a rub seasoning that I have been using forever. I found this, oh, sorry, that's my oven. It's telling me that it's up to temperature. I've been using this forever and just replenishing it because it has essentially the recipe on the label on the top of the jar. And so inside it has granulated garlic, it has dried, a little bit of dried cayenne pepper, chili pepper, or cumin, paprika, rosemary, which is not the full rosemary stems, but it's a ground version of rosemary. It has sage, ground thyme. It has some cinnamon in it, some ground allspice, and then black pepper and coriander. So it's got a little bit of everything. And I've also included some food grade cooking lavender, which I think was a really nice compliment. Whenever I've done this for guests, they've always said, "What is that flavor in that chicken?" And it's my secret weapon. It is food grade lavender. I just take the little flowers and rub them in my hand and they get all powdery and I just add it into the mix. So underside is seasoned. Just going to turn it over. And now I'm going to work on seasoning the skin. And this is where I'm going to add a fair amount of salt. This might actually be about 2 tablespoons by the time I'm all done. That looks like a lot of salt to some of you. I know it does. But trust me, you will be happy. It's a whole lot less salt than what you're getting from the chicken that's already pre-cooked for you. I can tell you that much. All right, pepper and some of my seasoning. And on the top here, I'm just going to make sure that I pat the seasoning into the skin. I just want to make sure that it is adhering so that when that fat starts to come out, the seasoning doesn't all just run off into the pan. So there's my pretty chicken ready to go. You can see how quick and easy that was. Let me give my hands a quick little wash. And I'm going to get a little olive oil for the baking tray. And this is just, I'm using a sheet pan. I'm just going to put just a scant teaspoon of oil on the bottom. You can see I've got 4 little drizzles there. I'm going to pick up my chicken and just put the bird right on there. I'm going to slide it around just a little bit so there's some good contact with the olive oil. I can get that yucky chickeny board off and set my pan on my other cutting board. And then I'm going to find a spot for my probe thermometer. Now, I've been doing chickens enough that I kind of know by sight when they're done. But if you've never cooked a whole chicken like this before, it doesn't hurt to use a thermometer to tell you when your chicken is getting close to being done. Breast meat needs to be cooked to a temperature of 165 degrees. The thigh and the leg, so the dark meat, needs to be cooked to a temperature of 175 degrees. So there's a 10-degree differential there. It's okay, these different types of meat do cook at different rates. It'll all come out the same timing, but it's good to know what the temperatures need to be. So I'm going to find a good fleshy part of this chicken breast to go in with my probe, and I'm just going to insert that, and I'm not going to let it touch any bones, but I want it in the thickest part, so it's right here in the middle of this chicken breast. Now this is the type of oven probe that you can actually leave in the bird while it's cooking. That's a very handy thing to have. It comes with a timer and the end of the probe. This is a heat safe coating on the wire, and it just hangs out of the oven, and you just plug it in and away you go. And I've got it set for 155 degrees because I want to know, about 10 minutes or so before this chicken is done, so that I can either pull it out and just let it coast to its final destination, or I can leave it in and know exactly how to time the rest of my meal. The other type of oven thermometer you might be familiar with is this type. It has a little sleeve that it fits into. Those are fine, they do a great job, but you do have to open up the oven and stick it into your meat at some place, and it can't be left in the meat while it's roasting. So you inevitably end up pulling that back out of your chicken. Well, what happens? All the juice that was in the hole now just comes running out of the hole. I find that I end up with a drier piece of meat if I keep poking holes in it while it's cooking. That's why I like this particular probe thermometer. All right, this is going in the oven at 400 degrees. My goal is to have dinner by 6 o'clock, so I'm thinking it's going to take 45 to 50 minutes to come up to its fully cooked temperature. Okay, on to the next thing. Okay, so with this chicken tonight, we're just going to keep it really light. I'm not going to mess around with pasta or potatoes or anything like that. We decided that we would have just a nice coleslaw with that and some naan. So let me show you what I did for the coleslaw. That's easy. I've already got it made because I kind of like it to marinate and get a little softer, but it's just a quarter of a cabbage. We had coleslaw earlier this week and there was still a good half of it left, so I chopped it in half again and giving me 2/4, and this is what's left. So I just sliced it really, really thin. I took the core out. You can see where the core used to be. I just made a V and took that white heavy core out, and then just sliced it really, really thin. The slaw also has a red onion that I slice incredibly thin. That's a good thing to practice with, is slicing an onion. So I have a big sharp knife that I like to use for my onions, and when I slice it, I make sure that the onion has a flat surface to lie on, just like that. So I've cut the onion in half, cleaned off the skin and the couple outer layers, and then I'm just going to put my knife just at the very edge of that onion, so you can barely see that I cut into it. It's just teeny tiny. I want paper thin cuts of onion. So what I do is just slowly slide that knife right down. Now, depending on how your knife skills are, you can go a little faster than that, but they just come out so nice and thin that even somebody who really objects to having a crunchy onion to bite into, that won't bother them at all in this slaw. The other 3 ingredients in the slaw are some dried cherries, just from the regular bag of dried cherries or from your bulk area. The other thing that's interesting about this slaw is I've got some dried, unsweetened coconut flakes. These are fabulous if you can find them in your grocery store. If not, you can make them. You can take apart a coconut and you can take your vegetable peeler and slice them into pieces like this. But what I like about them is they're not sweetened. So I just toasted these up lightly in a frying pan, a non-stick frying pan, and they darkened. All right, so I'll show you that in just a second with my prepared slaw. And then the last thing is just some sliced almonds. You could use slivered almonds if you've got them, but the sliced looks nice in the salad. So here's what it all looks like. You can see that I toasted up the almonds as well, okay? Just a nice nutty brown color on them. And then here's a piece of that coconut that got toasted up just like that. When you do that on the stove, you want to keep an eye on it. Don't walk away from it because both of those will burn pretty quickly. I would not toast the almonds and the coconut together. They cook at different rates, and if you try to do that, I have learned from experience that that's not a good thing to do. You end up with one or the other is black before the other one is nutty and brown. So that's kind of a mistake. The dressing on the slaw is about as simple as it gets. It's a dollop of mayonnaise in the bottom of the bowl. I took half a lime and juiced it and added just a little bit of salt and pepper and about a half a teaspoon of honey and just mixed it up. And that's all there was to it. So a slaw dressing is about as easy as it comes. If I didn't have a lime, I could use apple cider vinegar. Could just use regular old white vinegar if I wanted to do that. Lemon would work too. So just any old acid along with a little bit of mayonnaise makes for a really nice light slaw dressing. So that's the slaw component. The last thing I want to show you is what I'm going to do for the naan. If you're not familiar with naan, if you've never eaten in an Indian restaurant, naan is a flatbread that they put on the inside of their big tandoor oven. So that's this big, huge oven. It's just rocking hot inside, and they slap the bread raw right against the side. And then when it's done, it just peels right off, and it looks like this. All right. There's a little trick to cooking this because when you get it in the package, it's only par cooked, which means it's only partially cooked. There's a new way to cook this that I just recently learned by watching Rachel Ray's 30-minute meals. What she does is she just puts a griddle pan on the stove, gets it good and hot, and throws water, just half a cup of water, just right onto the griddle pan, and slaps the bread right down on that water. Incredible. But as that water converts to steam, it steams the bread, and it also softens the bottom so that it gets nice and blistered, just like this on the top. This is the side that was stuck to the oven. Well, you would want that same good crustiness on this side too. But when it comes off the griddle pan, it is so nice and soft and pliable. Naan is good all by itself. You don't have to put a lot on it. It's good eating just plain. But we're going to use a little garlic butter on it tonight. So when it comes off the griddle, all I'm going to do is take my pastry brush and just brush some melted butter on top of it. But I'm going to add some flavoring to our melted butter. I'm going to make a garlic butter. And some of you are saying, well, what's hard about that? There's nothing hard about that. And you can make it as easy as you want, but I like to use whole garlic. I don't like to use the garlic powder. I think it has kind of a raw nature to it. And so I like to use a whole garlic clove. Now this one, I happened to take out of its clove, and its paper was nice and loose, so it just fell right off. But I want to paste this garlic so that it really turns into something that is really just more of a flavorant than something with texture. So what I'm going to do is take my knife, put it over the garlic, and I'm just going to slap my fist down on that knife. Just like that. Flattened that garlic. In fact, I want it even flatter than that, so I'm going to do it again. And it is pulverized at this point, but it's still not as pulverized as I would like it. So now I'm going to paste it, and that is just I think the most fun activity. I take some kosher salt and just sprinkle it right on top of that garlic. The salt is going to act as an abrasive to help break down those fibers in the garlic. So I'm just going to take my knife and just keep kind of mashing that clove of garlic. Now this clove in the grocery store was a little past its prime. I see that it has a green sprout on it. I'm just going to pull that out because that's a little sharp in flavor. And so just keep pasting, paste away. You can see that this is just really turning into garlic mush. All right, just keep scraping it back off my board. And now you can see what the texture is. You almost can't even see any fibers anymore in that garlic. It is a paste. Just a super simple way to take that bite out of the garlic, the texture bite. It'll still have its garlicky bite, that's for sure. So then I just add it to a pat of butter in a ramekin. It already has salt, so I'm not going to salt it anymore. But I'm going to add a couple of twists of black pepper. And then, just for some color, I have a sprig of parsley. I'm going to pull the leaves off and kind of tighten them up on themselves so they make kind of a little ball. And I'm just going to go about finely shredding this. All right, I'm just making tiny, tiny little cuts, keeping my fingers out of the way. All right, so that takes a little bit of practice. If you're not used to doing that, just go slow. But now that I've been through one direction, I'd like to cut through in the other direction, just so I get small, tiny little pieces of garlic. So I just set the blade of my knife on the board, and it's my pivot point. And I think just about anybody who's going to be watching these demonstrations knows about central pivot irrigation. So you've got your fields of corn or what have you that have got watering devices in the middle, and it's got a pivot on one end, and the water just sprinkles around the field like this. Well, that's the same concept with your knife. You just want to go off that pivot point, and you can go back and forth. I come along and I scrape the edge. Okay. All right, and there I am with my really finely minced parsley. Now you've seen me a couple of times here, scrape the edge of my knife. I know exactly where that blade is. I've had this knife for probably 20 years, and this knife and I are friends by now. If you're not best friends with your knives, this is a little dicey. Don't do that. But once you get really comfortable with your knife, you'll know where the edge is and where the danger zone is on this. So that's it. I'll just throw that in the microwave about a minute before we're ready to eat, and it'll melt down. In fact, I might not even put it in the microwave. I might just put it on the rack of the oven after I've turned the oven off, and that'll melt in about 2 minutes, no time. And we'll be ready to go. So that's seasoning the spatchcocked chicken, a quick little slaw, and a quick garlic butter. I'll be back to show you the finished product.